The streets went quiet the moment his brother spoke up. Not because of what he said, but because of who he said it about. A man the world sees as untouchable. A legend wrapped in smoke, music, and loyalty speeches. But tonight, that image starts to crack. Because while one voice praised brotherhood on stage, another voice behind closed doors was asking a dangerous question: who are you really standing with? As a federal trial drags old names back into the light, old wounds start bleeding again. Calls made too early. Friendships that don't sit right. Silence that feels louder than words. And a family that believes loyalty was broken long before the world noticed. Some say this is just grief talking. Others say this is the truth finally losing its patience. But when lines are drawn in the middle of a legacy, there's no neutral ground left. And once you hear what's been whispered for years, you'll understand why this story was never meant to stay buried. Before the headlines, before the theories, before the trial dates and viral clips, there was a bomb the streets believed in. A bomb that looked solid from the outside. Two West Coast icons moving in the same circles, sharing stages, sharing praise, sharing the language of loyalty. One was already a legend. The other was becoming one in real time. And for years, people thought they stood on the same side. Nipsey Hussle wasn't just another rapper rising out of South Central. He was a symbol. A man who turned corners into classrooms and storefronts into statements. To the fans, he represented evolution without forgetting where you came from. To the streets, he represented something even heavier: independence. Nip didn't want permission. He didn't want protection. He didn't want to check in. He wanted ownership. And that mindset quietly made enemies. Behind the scenes, relationships were shifting. Names that once opened doors started to feel like chains. People Nip used to stand next to were no longer welcome in his circle. Conversations got colder. Distance grew. And according to those close to him, that distance wasn't accidental. Nip was pulling away on purpose. He was choosing peace over politics, business over street hierarchy. And not everyone respected that choice. After Nipsey was killed, the world froze. Murals went up overnight. Candlelight vigils filled the block. Millions mourned a man they never met but felt connected to. On the biggest stages, powerful voices spoke about love, brotherhood, and loss. One voice in particular stood out: emotional, poetic, convincing. The words felt real. The tears looked real. To the public, it felt like unity. But grief looks different inside the family. While the cameras were rolling, Nipsey's brother was watching everything from a different angle. Every interview, every photo, every public association. He wasn't listening to what people said. He was watching what they did. And some of those moves didn't sit right. Because while Nip was being honored in words, certain alliances were being honored in action. As time passed, whispers grew louder. Why are you standing with him? Why now? Why after everything? To outsiders, it looked like nothing. To the family, it felt like betrayal. Because they knew the history. They knew who Nip had cut off. They knew which relationships ended quietly and which ended badly. And they knew Nip didn't make those decisions lightly. Then came the trial. Suddenly, old names were back in the headlines. Federal language. Serious charges. Allegations that painted a picture far bigger than one incident. And with every new detail, the past started knocking louder. Stories resurfaced. Old interviews felt different. Moments that once seemed harmless were being replayed with new context. That's when emotions boiled over. According to people close to the situation, Nipsey's brother reached a breaking point. Not in public, not on a stage, but in raw, unfiltered conversations where grief finally turned into anger. In his eyes, loyalty wasn't about speeches or tributes. It was about choices made when no one was watching. And those choices, he believed, spoke louder than anything said at a funeral. Fans started taking sides without realizing it. Some defended the legend. Others stood with the bloodline. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. Everyone had an opinion, but very few had proximity to the truth. Because what the internet saw as drama, the family felt as disrespect. And what looked like silence to some felt like confirmation to others. This wasn't about clout. This wasn't about attention. This was about a brother who believed his sibling's legacy was being compromised in real time. And as the trial continued pulling threads from the past, one question kept resurfacing in private conversations and public whispers alike. If Nipsey stood for independence, for separation from old control, for building something new, why were the people he walked away from suddenly being embraced by those who claimed to love him most? And once that question is asked, it doesn't go away. The deeper people looked, the messier it got. Because once emotions cracked the surface, stories that had been whispered for years started getting told out loud. Phone calls, meetings, side conversations that never made it to camera. And suddenly, the timeline didn't feel as clean as everyone wanted it to be. One name kept circling back into the conversation. Not because it was new, but because it never really left. A name tied to influence, to structure, to how things used to move in South Central before Nipsey decided to move differently. According to people who claim they were around back then, Nip's relationship with certain figures didn't end in peace. It ended in distance. And distance, in the streets, is rarely accidental. Behind closed doors, some say Nip felt boxed in. Not creatively. Not financially. But politically. The kind of pressure that doesn't show up in interviews. The kind you feel when your independence threatens someone else's control. And as Nip built his own lane, that pressure allegedly grew heavier. Quiet at first. Then uncomfortable. Then impossible to ignore. After his death, there were calls that made people uneasy. Calls that came too early. Calls that didn't line up with what the public timeline would later show. One person close to the circle would later claim he was told the news before it was supposed to be news. At the time, he brushed it off as confusion. Shock does that. But looking back, that moment never sat right with him. And once he said it out loud, others admitted they felt the same chill. None of this ever made it into official reports. No charges came from it. No courtroom confirmations. Just stories. Claims. Memories that refuse to fade. But when those memories collide with an active federal case involving power, money, and alleged control, people start connecting dots whether they're supposed to or not. That's where the betrayal narrative really ignited. Because while some were distancing themselves from the controversy, others weren't. Public appearances kept happening. Photos kept surfacing. Friendly conversations, shared platforms, familiar laughter. To fans, it looked like nothing. To the family, it felt like a slap. Not because of what was said, but because of who it was said with. Nipsey's brother reportedly made it clear in private. This wasn't about ego. This was about respect. You can't claim someone as family, and then ignore the lines they drew while they were alive. You can't celebrate a man's principles while standing next to people he intentionally walked away from. In his mind, that wasn't complicated. It was code. The internet didn't help. Clips were taken out of context. Old interviews resurfaced. Every pause, every smile, every silence was dissected. Some people swore they heard apologies hidden between the lines. Others insisted nothing was being said at all. But silence, in moments like this, becomes its own language. And everyone translates it differently. As the federal case continued unfolding, the stakes got higher. This wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about what the future might expose. Allegations of systems, of enforcement, of punishment for those who didn't play along. Whether true or not, those accusations added weight to every old interaction connected to Nipsey's final years. And that's when the question stopped being about one person and started becoming about the entire culture. Is loyalty about what you say when the world is watching? Or is it about who you refuse to stand next to when the cameras are off? Is silence wisdom, or is it protection? And if protecting yourself means disrespecting the dead, where does that leave the legacy everyone claims to care about? No one had clear answers. But the tension was no longer underground. It was public. And with every new revelation from the courtroom, the line between tribute and betrayal grew thinner. By the time the tension reached its peak, it was clear this story was never going to end with clean answers. Too many emotions. too much history. Too many moments that could never be replayed. What started as mourning had turned into something heavier, something closer to reckoning. For Nipsey's brother, the fight was never about the internet. It was about memory. About protecting a legacy that couldn't defend itself anymore. While the world debated theories and timelines, he was living with the silence left behind. The phone that would never ring. The conversations that ended too soon. And every time another name surfaced next to someone Nip had deliberately distanced himself from, it reopened wounds that never healed. Privately, people say the frustration reached a breaking point. Words were exchanged. Accusations flew. Not in press conferences, not in viral rants, but in raw conversations where grief stripped away restraint. In those moments, the message was simple and uncompromising. You don't get to rewrite who Nip stood with just because he's no longer here to correct the record. Meanwhile, the trial continued, pulling attention back to the past. Allegations painted a picture of power and control that felt uncomfortably familiar to those who knew Nip's journey. The idea that independence could be seen as defiance. That refusing to fall in line could carry consequences. None of it proven. None of it charged in connection to Nip. But enough to make people revisit old assumptions with new eyes. Fans felt caught in the middle. Some refused to believe their heroes could exist in moral gray areas. Others began questioning everything they thought they knew. Online debates turned heated. Supporters defended silence as maturity. Critics saw it as avoidance. Every side believed they were protecting Nipsey's legacy, yet none of them owned it the way his family did. What made it more haunting was the contrast. Public tributes still played. Old speeches still circulated. Words about brotherhood, unity, and love echoed louder than ever. But to those closest to Nip, words were cheap. Actions were permanent. And actions, once taken, couldn't be undone no matter how many years passed. The hardest truth to accept was that this conflict didn't need a villain to exist. It only needed misaligned loyalty. A difference in how people define respect. For some, survival in the industry means staying neutral, staying connected, staying protected. For others, especially those bound by blood, neutrality itself feels like betrayal. As time moves forward, the mystery remains unresolved. No new charges. No final revelations. Just a growing awareness that legacy is fragile. That once someone is gone, everyone left behind tells their version of the story. And not all versions can coexist peacefully. Nipsey Hussle's impact continues to stretch far beyond music. His stores still stand. His message still inspires. His name still brings people together. But it also exposes fractures that were always there, waiting for the right moment to surface. In the end, this isn't just a story about accusations or alliances. It's about what happens when grief collides with power, when loyalty is tested under public scrutiny, and when silence becomes louder than any diss record ever could. And until every question is answered, one thing remains certain. The conversation isn't over. It's only changed shape. What makes this story so unsettling isn't just what we know, it's everything we still don't. A legacy built on independence now surrounded by unanswered questions. A brother still standing guard over a name the world refuses to stop debating. And a trial that may expose more than anyone is ready for. If you felt that tension, you're not alone. Because this chapter doesn't close here. There are still voices that haven't spoken, details that haven't surfaced, and moments from the past that might look very different once everything comes out. So ask yourself, was this silence protection, or was it something else entirely? And if loyalty really means choosing sides, who truly chose Nipsey? If you want to hear what insiders claim was said behind closed doors, if you want to break down the next developments before they hit the headlines, stay right here. Because the next part of this story doesn't just revisit the past, it changes how we see everything that came after.